The Tyloth Empire's invasion fleet hovered ominously over the blue marble of Earth, their advanced technology outmatching humanity's primitive defenses. Thousands of sleek, angular warships blotted out the sun, casting an eerie shadow over the fragile human civilization below. Aboard the flagship, the Tyloth High Commander, Zarthos, surveyed the scene with a sense of grim satisfaction. After centuries of methodical expansion, subjugating species after species, the time had come to add Earth to the Empire's growing dominion. "Begin the bombardment," Zarthos commanded, his cold, gray eyes betraying no emotion. "Level their major cities and military installations. Once the humans are cowed, we will deploy the ground forces to secure their capitulation." The order was quickly relayed, and moments later, a hail of destructive energy beams rained down upon the helpless planet. Skyscrapers crumbled, military bases were reduced to smoldering craters, and panicked civilians fled in terror as their world burned. Yet, to Zarthos's growing unease, the human resistance proved far more tenacious than expected. Anti-aircraft batteries unleashed a withering barrage, downing dozens of Tyloth fighters. Missile silos and hastily erected laser cannons managed to inflict significant losses on the invading armada. "Impossible," the High Commander growled, watching as his carefully orchestrated assault encountered unexpected roadblocks. "How can these primitives mount such a fierce defense?" It was a question that would plague the Tyloth leadership in the days to come. For while the aliens' technological superiority was beyond doubt, they had grossly underestimated the sheer determination and innovative spirit of the human race. On the ground, Sarah Johnson, the Tyloth Empire's top xenobiologist, observed the unfolding conflict with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing trepidation. Embedded among the humans for months, she had amassed a wealth of data on their physiology, social structures, and cultural nuances, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw, primal ferocity that now manifested across the globe. As the bombardment continued, Sarah witnessed ordinary civilians transform into makeshift soldiers, grabbing whatever weapons they could find to defend their homes and loved ones. Crumbling buildings became fortified strongholds, with civilians and military personnel fighting side by side against the alien invaders. "This is unprecedented," she murmured, her fingers flying across the touchscreen of her datapad as she recorded her observations. "The human capacity for violence and self-sacrifice is beyond anything I've encountered in my studies of other species." Sarah had always been fascinated by the complexities of the human psyche, delving deep into their history of warfare, their tribal affiliations, and their unrelenting drive to protect their kin. But now she was witnessing these traits coalesce into a formidable, unyielding resistance that defied all logic. As the battle raged on, she noted the curious way in which human soldiers seemed to draw strength from the threat of their own mortality. Rather than cowering in the face of the Tyloth's devastating firepower, they charged headlong into the fray, their eyes alight with a fervor that bordered on the insane. "They're not afraid to die," Sarah realized, her brow furrowed in contemplation. In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their homeworld, no matter the cost. The xenobiologist's fingers paused on her datapad as she considered the implications of this revelation. If the Tyloth Empire was to succeed in its conquest of Earth, it would need to contend with a species that valued individual freedom and the sanctity of their home above all else. Mere technological superiority would not be enough to break their will. Zarthos, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated as his forces struggled to gain a decisive foothold. Scores of Tyloth soldiers had already fallen, their advanced combat skills and firepower seemingly outmatched by the sheer determination of the human defenders. "This is unacceptable," the High Commander roared, slamming his fist against the holographic display that dominated the bridge of his flagship. "Redouble the bombardment. Leave nothing standing." As the relentless assault continued, Sarah Johnson watched with a growing sense of unease. She had seen the ferocity of the human spirit, and she knew that the Tyloth Empire had vastly underestimated its adversary. For in the face of annihilation, Humanity would fight with every fiber of its being. And the invaders would soon learn the true meaning of the phrase, the deadliest fighters in the universe. Perplexed by the humans' tenacious resistance, the Psyloph leadership had dispatched their finest xenobiologist, Sarah Johnson, to study this puzzling adversary up close. Embedded among the human populace, she was determined to uncover the secrets that made them such a formidable foe. As the bombardment raged overhead, Sarah moved through the rubble-strewn streets of a battered city, observing the desperate struggle of the civilian defenders. She watched in awe as mothers shielded their children with their own bodies, as young men and women rushed to aid the wounded, as entire neighborhoods banded together to construct improvised fortifications. The level of cooperation and self-sacrifice is astounding, Sarah murmured, her fingers tapping furiously on her datapad. These humans are treating the defense of their homeworld as a collective endeavor, not just the responsibility of their military. Weaving through the chaos, Sarah made her way to a makeshift command center, where a grizzled army veteran was directing the distribution of weapons and supplies. She approached him cautiously, mindful of the suspicion with which the humans viewed their alien observer. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I'm a researcher trying to understand your people's resistance to the Psyloph invasion. Could you tell me what motivates you and your comrades to fight so fiercely?" The veteran eyed her warily, his weathered face etched with a lifetime of hardship and struggle. "You want to know what motivates us?" he growled, his grip tightening on the assault rifle in his hands. "It's simple, really. We're fighting for our homes, our families, our way of life. The Psyloph think they can just waltz in and take everything we've built, but they've got another thing coming." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the battered cityscape. "These streets, these buildings, they're not just empty structures to us. They're the foundations of our communities, the places where we've lived and loved and lost. We're not going to let some alien invaders destroy that without a fight." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, her eyes widening as she absorbed the depth of human attachment to their homeworld. "And what of your own personal safety?" she asked. "Aren't you afraid of being killed in the fighting?" The veteran let out a harsh laugh. "Afraid? Nah, ain't no room for fear when the whole damn world's at stake. Death is a part of life, and if I have to give mine to protect my family and my home, then so be it. I'm not going down without a hell of a fight." As he spoke, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in the man's demeanor, a sense of purpose and determination that seemed to radiate from him. It was as if the prospect of his own mortality had granted him a newfound sense of strength and resolve. "Remarkable," Sarah murmured, jotting down her observations. "The human willingness to sacrifice themselves for their kin and their homeworld is truly unprecedented in my experience." Bidding the veteran farewell, Sarah continued her survey of the human resistance, observing similar displays of courage and self-sacrifice everywhere she turned. She watched in awe as civilians fashioned makeshift weapons from scrap metal and household items, their ingenuity and resourcefulness on full display. But it was the behavior of the human soldiers that truly captivated her. Time and again, she witnessed them charging into the fray, their faces twisted in expressions of primal fury, seemingly impervious to the Psyloph's devastating firepower. They fought with a reckless abandon that defied all logic, drawing strength from the very threat of their own demise. This is not mere bravery, Sarah realized, her fingers flying across her datapad. It's something deeper, something more fundamental to the human psyche. They are not afraid to die. They embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their world, no matter the cost. As the bombardment continued unabated, Sarah knew that the Psyloph Empire had vastly underestimated the tenacity and ferocity of the human spirit. These were no mere primitives, easily cowed by superior technology and firepower. They were warriors, forged by millennia of conflict and hardship, willing to fight to the last breath to protect all that they held dear. And in that moment, Sarah Johnson knew that the fate of the Psyloph invasion hung in the balance. For if the humans could harness the full power of their unrelenting determination and their capacity for violence, they might just prove to be the deadliest fighters the universe had ever seen. As Sarah Johnson embedded herself among the humans, she was struck by their primal tribalism and unparalleled capacity for violence. These creatures were not the meek, docile subjects that Tyloth had subjugated before. They were warriors, forged by millennia of conflict. The xenobiologist's initial observations had been eye-opening, but as she delved deeper into the human psyche, the true nature of their species began to reveal itself in all its terrifying glory. Sarah witnessed how the threat of annihilation had galvanized the human population, erasing the petty divisions and ideological factions that had once plagued their societies. In the face of the Tyloth onslaught, they had united as one, their only allegiance now to the defense of their homeworld. Their capacity for cooperation is astounding, Sarah murmured, watching as entire communities banded together to construct makeshift fortifications and coordinate the distribution of scarce resources. They are able to put aside their differences and work towards a common goal, driven by an almost primal instinct to protect their kin and their way of life. But it was the human's predisposition for violence that truly unsettled the Tyloth xenobiologist. Time and again, she witnessed ordinary citizens transform into ruthless, unstoppable fighters, their eyes burning with a fervor that bordered on the insane. Sarah studied the soldiers, their movements fluid and efficient, their weapons wielded with a precision that belied their lack of formal training. She noted the way they charged into the fray, seemingly oblivious to the danger, their faces twisted in expressions of savage determination. They do not fear death, she realized, her fingers flying across her datapad as she recorded her observations. In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their homeworld, no matter the cost. The xenobiologist delved deeper into the human history of warfare, uncovering a tapestry of conflict that stretched back millennia. She studied the great battles and conquests, the technological advancements that had fueled the human thirst for dominance, and the persistent tribal affiliations that had driven them to wage war against one another. Violence is woven into the very fabric of their society, Sarah murmured, her brow furrowed in contemplation. They have honed it, refined it, and elevated it to an art form, and now they are directing that same ferocity towards the defense of their homeworld against the Tyloth invaders. As the bombardment continued, Sarah witnessed the human soldiers employ increasingly innovative and ruthless tactics. They ambushed Tyloth ground forces, using the rubble-strewn terrain to their advantage, and they sabotaged the invaders' supply lines with daring raids and hit-and-run strikes. They are not simply reacting to the Tyloth assault, Sarah realized. They are actively seeking ways to gain the upper hand, to turn the tide of the battle in their favor. Their adaptability and resourcefulness are truly remarkable. The xenobiologist's reports back to the Tyloth leadership grew increasingly alarming. She detailed the humans' primal tribalism, their unparalleled capacity for violence, and their utter disregard for their own safety in the face of overwhelming odds. These are not the docile, easily subjugated species we have encountered before, Sarah warned, her voice tinged with a rare note of urgency. Humanity possesses a warrior spirit that is unlike anything that Tyloth Empire has ever faced. If we underestimate them, we do so at our own peril. Zarthos, the Tyloth High Commander, listened to Sarah's report with a growing sense of unease. The xenobiologist's findings challenged everything that Tyloth leadership had come to expect from their conquests. These humans were no mere primitives. They were a formidable adversary, forged by millennia of conflict and hardship. So be it, Zarthos growled, his gray eyes narrowing. If the humans wish to fight, then we shall give them a war like no other. The full might of the Tyloth Empire shall be brought to bear, and we shall grind their resistance into dust. But as the bombardment intensified, and the Tyloth ground forces prepared to launch their assault, Sarah Johnson knew that her superiors had once again underestimated the true power of the human spirit. For in the face of annihilation, these warriors would fight with every fiber of their being. And the invaders would soon learn the true meaning of the phrase, the deadliest fighters in the universe. As Sarah Johnson's findings grew increasingly unsettling, the Psyloph High Commander, Zarthos, could not shake the growing sense of unease that gnawed at him. The reports detailed a species unlike any the Empire had encountered before, one whose capacity for violence and self-sacrifice defied all logic. Sarah's latest dispatch painted a particularly chilling picture. She had observed the human soldiers, their movements fluid and efficient, their weapons wielded with a precision that belied their lack of formal training. But it was the unwavering determination in their eyes that truly unsettled the Psyloph xenobiologist. They do not fear death, Sarah had written, her words stark and uncompromising. In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their homeworld, no matter the cost. Zarthos replayed the recording, his jaw clenched tight. The humans' willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of their kin and their way of life was unlike anything that Psyloph Empire had faced in its centuries-long campaign of conquest. They are not mere primitives to be subjugated, the High Commander mused, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. They are warriors, forged by millennia of conflict and hardship, and they will not surrender without a fight. As the bombardment continued to rain down upon the human cities, Zarthos could not help but marvel at the tenacity of their resistance. Time and again, the Psyloph forces encountered unexpected roadblocks, their superior technology and firepower seemingly outmatched by the sheer determination of their adversaries. Sarah's reports had provided valuable insights into the human psyche, but Zarthos knew that mere understanding was not enough. If the Psyloph Empire was to succeed in its conquest of Earth, it would need to confront the full force of the human warrior spirit head-on. Dispatch the ground forces, the High Commander commanded, his voice cutting through the din of the bridge. Let us see just how formidable these humans truly are when faced with our might. Across the planet, the Psyloph invasion force began its descent. Thousands of gleaming, angular warships disgorging legions of heavily armored soldiers and towering mechanized war machines. The humans, their backs against the wall, braced themselves for the onslaught, their makeshift fortifications and hastily assembled defenses the only bulwark against the alien juggernaut. Sarah Johnson watched the unfolding battle with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing dread. She had witnessed the humans' capacity for violence firsthand, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer ferocity with which they now fought. As the Psyloph ground forces surged forward, the human defenders met them with a fury that bordered on the insane. Soldiers and civilians alike charged into the fray, their eyes alight with a primal determination that transcended mere bravery. They are not afraid to die, Sarah murmured, her fingers flying across her datapad as she recorded her observations. They embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their homeworld, no matter the cost. The Psyloph troops, for all their technological superiority, found themselves overwhelmed by the human onslaught. Soldiers were torn apart by a hail of makeshift weaponry, their advanced armor and shields proving no match for the sheer ferocity of the defenders. Sarah watched in awe as ordinary citizens transformed into ruthless, unstoppable fighters, their movements fluid and efficient, their weapons wielded with a precision that defied their lack of formal training. They fought with an intensity that seemed to defy the laws of physics, their bodies fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and determination. This is no mere bravery, the xenobiologist realized, her brow furrowed in contemplation. It is something more primal, more fundamental to the human psyche. They are not simply defending their homes and loved ones. They are tapping into a well of violence and self-sacrifice that runs deeper than anything I have ever encountered. As the battle raged on, Sarah began to understand the true nature of the human warrior spirit. These were not the meek, docile subjects that Psyloph had subjugated before. They were a race of apex predators, their capacity for violence honed to a razor's edge by millennia of conflict and hardship. And in that moment, The xenobiologist knew that the fate of the Psyloth invasion hung in the balance. For if the humans could harness the full power of their unrelenting determination and their capacity for violence, they might just prove to be the deadliest fighters the universe had ever seen. As Sarah Johnson's findings grew increasingly unsettling, the most chilling discovery was yet to come. Delving deeper into the human psyche, the Psyloth xenobiologist uncovered a phenomenon that would forever change the course of the invasion. It began with her observations of the human soldiers, their movements fluid and efficient, their weapons wielded with a precision that belied their lack of formal training. But it was the unwavering determination in their eyes, the primal fury that seemed to emanate from them, that truly captivated Sarah. "They do not fear death," she had written in her previous dispatch, her words stark and uncompromising. In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their homeworld, no matter the cost. Now, as Sarah watched the human defenders battle the Psyloth ground forces, she began to understand the true source of their ferocity. It was not mere bravery, nor even a desperate last stand. It was something far more primal, more fundamental to the human psyche. They are able to achieve heightened states of combat effectiveness through the release of adrenaline and other neurochemicals, Sarah murmured, her fingers flying across her data pad as she recorded her observations. This berserker rage transforms them into unstoppable juggernauts, capable of feats of strength and endurance that defy logic. The xenobiologist had witnessed it firsthand, as ordinary citizens and soldiers alike charged into the fray, their eyes alight with a fervor that bordered on the insane. They fought with a reckless abandon, seeming to draw strength from the very threat of their own demise. It is as if they are tapping into a well of violence and self-sacrifice that runs deeper than anything I have ever encountered, Sarah wrote, her brow furrowed in contemplation. They are not simply defending their homes and loved ones. They are embracing the very essence of their warrior spirit, honed by millennia of conflict and hardship. As the battle raged on, the Psyloth forces found themselves increasingly outmatched by the sheer ferocity of the human onslaught. Their advanced technology and firepower proved no match for the unstoppable juggernaut of the berserker-fueled defenders. Zarthos, the Psyloth High Commander, watched the unfolding carnage with a growing sense of horror. Sarah's reports had painted a chilling picture, but the reality of the human warrior spirit was even more terrifying than he could have imagined. "How can we hope to defeat such a foe?" the High Commander murmured, his gray eyes narrowing as he surveyed the battlefield. "Their capacity for violence and self-sacrifice is unlike anything that Psyloth Empire has ever encountered." Faced with this revelation, the Psyloth leadership was torn. Some advocated for an immediate, overwhelming assault to crush humanity before they could fully mobilize their forces. Others argued for a more cautious approach, fearing the consequences of provoking such a dangerous adversary. "If we underestimate them again, we do so at our own peril," Sarah warned, her voice tinged with a rare note of urgency. "These humans are not mere primitives to be subjugated. They are warriors, forged by millennia of conflict, and they will fight to the last breath to defend their homeworld." Zarthos listened to the xenobiologist's report, his brow furrowed in deep contemplation. The Psyloth Empire had encountered many formidable foes in its endless quest for expansion, but none had proven as elusive or as dangerous as the humans. "Then we shall meet their fury with our own," the High Commander declared, his voice cold and unyielding. "The full might of the Psyloth Empire shall be brought to bear, and we shall grind their resistance into dust, no matter the cost." As the Psyloth forces redoubled their assault, Sarah Johnson watched with a mixture of dread and fascination. She knew that the fate of the invasion now hung in the balance, for if the humans could harness the full power of their berserker rage, they might just prove to be the deadliest fighters the universe had ever seen. Faced with Sarah Johnson's chilling report on the true nature of the human warrior spirit, the Psyloth leadership was torn. Some advocated for an immediate, overwhelming assault to crush humanity before they could fully mobilize their forces. Others argued for a more cautious approach, fearing the consequences of provoking such a dangerous adversary. Zarthos, the High Commander, listened to the impassioned debate, his gray eyes narrowed in deep contemplation. The xenobiologist's findings had shaken him to the core, challenging everything that Psyloth Empire had come to expect from its conquests. These humans are not mere primitives to be subjugated, Sarah had warned, her voice tinged with a rare note of urgency. They are warriors, forged by millennia of conflict, and they will fight to the last breath to defend their homeworld. The High Commander's fingers drummed against the armrest of his chair as he considered the implications. If the Tyla forces underestimated the humans once more, the consequences could be catastrophic. Sarah's reports had painted a chilling picture of a species capable of feats of strength and endurance that defied logic, driven by an unwavering determination to protect all that they held dear. We cannot afford to be complacent. Zarthos finally spoke, his voice cutting through the din of the bridge. The humans have proven themselves to be a most formidable adversary, and we must be prepared to meet their fury with our own. The High Commander turned his gaze to the tactical display, his expression grim. "Redouble the bombardment," he commanded, his tone unyielding. "Concentrate our firepower on the enemy's key military installations and centers of resistance. Once we have softened their defenses, we will deploy the ground forces to secure their capitulation." Across the bridge, Sarah Johnson watched the unfolding events with a growing sense of trepidation. She knew that the Psyloth Empire was prepared to unleash the full might of its technological superiority. But deep down, she feared that even their advanced weaponry would be no match for the sheer ferocity of the human warrior spirit. "They are not simply defending their homes and loved ones," the xenobiologist murmured, her fingers flying across her datapad as she recorded her thoughts. "They are tapping into a well of violence and self-sacrifice that runs deeper than anything I have ever encountered. If the Tyloth underestimate them again, the consequences could be catastrophic." As the bombardment intensified, the human defenders braced themselves for the inevitable Psyloth ground assault. Across the globe, communities banded together, pooling their resources and coordinating their efforts to fortify their positions and prepare for the coming onslaught. Sarah watched in awe as ordinary citizens transformed into makeshift soldiers, their eyes alight with a fervor that bordered on the insane. They fashioned crude but effective weapons from scrap metal and household items, their ingenuity and resourcefulness on full display. "They are not afraid to die," the xenobiologist realized, her brow furrowed in contemplation. In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their homeworld, no matter the cost. Zarthos, meanwhile, studied the tactical displays with a growing sense of unease. Sarah's reports had painted a clear picture of the human capacity for violence and self-sacrifice, and the High Commander knew that the Psyloth forces could not afford to take them lightly. "We must strike decisively and without mercy," he murmured, his fingers tightening around the hilt of his sidearm. "If we show any sign of weakness, the humans will seize upon it and turn the tide of the battle against us." As the Tyloth ground forces prepared to launch their assault, Sarah Johnson knew that the fate of the invasion hung in the balance. The Tyloth leadership had underestimated the humans once before, and the consequences had been devastating. Now, as the two sides braced for the ultimate confrontation, the xenobiologist could only hope that her superiors had learned from their mistakes. For if the humans could harness the full power of their berserker rage, they might just prove to be the deadliest fighters the universe had ever seen. As the Tyloth forces prepared to launch their decisive assault, human scouts detected the invaders' massive fleet amassing on the edge of the solar system. Immediately, a call to arms went out across the globe, rallying the world's greatest warriors to defend their homeworld against the impending onslaught. Sarah Johnson watched with a mixture of trepidation and awe as the human resistance mobilized. She had witnessed the ferocity of their fighting spirit firsthand, and she knew that the Psyloth Empire was about to face its greatest challenge yet. Across the shattered cities and towns, the veterans of past conflicts emerged from the shadows, their weathered faces etched with a grim determination. These were the true warriors of humanity, their skills honed by decades of bloody combat, their resolve forged in the crucible of war. "We've been waiting for this day," one grizzled soldier, callsign Grizzly, growled as he inspected the makeshift weaponry assembled by his comrades. "The Oxylo think they can just waltz in and take our world, but they've got another thing coming." Beside him, a young woman with piercing eyes and a steely demeanor nodded in agreement. "Dan right," she said, her voice laced with a fierce pride. "These alien bastards have no idea what they're up against. We're going to show them the true meaning of the phrase, the deadliest fighters in the universe." As the Tyloth ground forces began their descent, the human defenders mobilized with a speed and efficiency that left their alien adversaries reeling. Soldiers and civilians alike rushed to their posts, their weapons at the ready, their eyes burning with a ferocity that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Sarah witnessed the transformation firsthand, her datapad recording every detail as the human warriors prepared for the coming onslaught. She watched in awe as they coordinated their efforts, drawing upon decades of hard-won experience to fortify their positions and anticipate the Psyloth's tactics. "They are not simply reacting to the invasion," the xenobiologist murmured, her fingers flying across the touchscreen. "They are actively seeking ways to gain the upper hand, to turn the tide of the battle in their favor. Their adaptability and resourcefulness are truly remarkable." As the first Tyloth dropships breached the atmosphere, the human defenders unleashed a hail of withering fire. Makeshift rocket launchers and hastily constructed laser cannons tore through the invaders' armored transports, sending them plummeting to the ground in blazing wrecks. Zarthos, the Psyloth High Commander, watched the unfolding battle with growing frustration. His forces were encountering unexpected resistance at every turn, their technological superiority seemingly no match for the sheer ferocity of the human warriors. "They fight with a reckless abandon that defies all logic," the High Commander growled, his gray eyes narrowed in a rare display of emotion. "Their willingness to sacrifice everything for the defense of their homeworld is unlike anything we have ever encountered." Sarah, embedded among the human resistance, could only nod in agreement. She had seen firsthand the transformation that took place as ordinary citizens became unstoppable juggernauts, their bodies fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and determination. "They are not afraid to die," the xenobiologist murmured, her gaze fixed on the unfolding battle. "In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their world, no matter the cost." As the Tyloth forces continued their relentless assault, the human defenders met them with a fury that bordered on the insane. Soldiers and civilians alike charged into the fray, their eyes alight with a primal determination that transcended mere bravery. Zarthos, his frustration mounting, ordered his troops to redouble their efforts, but the human resistance only seemed to grow stronger in the face of the onslaught. They fought with a savagery that the Psyloth had never encountered, their makeshift weapons proving no match for the invaders' advanced technology. "They are not mere primitives to be subjugated," the High Commander realized, his jaw clenched tight. "They are warriors, forged by millennia of conflict and hardship, and they will not surrender without a fight." As the battle raged on, Sarah Johnson knew that the fate of the Psyloth invasion hung in the balance. For if the humans could harness the full power of their berserker rage, they might just prove to be the deadliest fighters the universe had ever seen. As the Tyloth forces continued their relentless assault, the human defenders met them with a fury that bordered on the insane. Soldiers and civilians alike charged into the fray, their eyes alight with a primal determination that transcended mere bravery. Zarthos, the Psyloth High Commander, watched the unfolding carnage with a growing sense of dread. His troops, for all their technological superiority, were being swept aside by the unstoppable onslaught of the human warriors. "They fight with a savagery that defies all logic," the High Commander growled, his fingers tightening around the hilt of his sidearm. "Their willingness to sacrifice everything for the defense of their homeworld is unlike anything we have ever encountered." Sarah Johnson, embedded among the human resistance, observed the battle with a mixture of scientific fascination and profound respect. She had witnessed the transformation firsthand, as ordinary citizens became unstoppable juggernauts, their bodies fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and determination. "They are not afraid to die," the xenobiologist murmured, her gaze fixed on the unfolding chaos. "In fact, they seem to embrace it, as if their lives have no greater purpose than to defend their world, no matter the cost." As the Tyloth forces pressed forward, they encountered wave after wave of human defenders, each more ferocious than the last. Makeshift weapons and improvised explosives rained down upon the invaders, their advanced armor and shields proving no match for the sheer intensity of the onslaught. Zarthos, his frustration mounting, ordered his troops to pull back, desperate to regroup and reassess their strategy. But the human resistance refused to relent, their relentless pursuit cutting off the Tyloth forces' avenues of retreat. "They are not simply reacting to our assault," the High Commander realized, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "They are actively seeking ways to turn the tide of the battle in their favor, their adaptability and resourcefulness matching our own." Sarah watched in awe as the human warriors coordinated their efforts, drawing upon decades of hard-won experience to anticipate the Tyloth's movements and counter them with devastating precision. Their makeshift fortifications and improvised tactics proved to be surprisingly effective, blunting the invaders' technological superiority. "They are not mere primitives to be subjugated," the xenobiologist murmured, her fingers flying across her datapad. "They are a race of apex predators, their capacity for violence honed to a razor's edge by millennia of conflict and hardship." As the battle raged on, the Tyloth forces found themselves increasingly outmatched, their advanced weaponry and tactics proving no match for the sheer ferocity of the human defenders. Zarthos, his face etched with a rare expression of fear, ordered a full-scale retreat, his fleet battered and his invasion force in shambles. "Impossible," the High Commander growled, his fists clenched in impotent rage. "How can these primitives have defeated the might of the Tyloth Empire?" Sarah, observing the Tyloth force's hasty withdrawal, could only shake her head in wonder. She had witnessed firsthand the power of the human warrior spirit, a force of nature that defied all logic and reason. "They are not mere primitives," the xenobiologist murmured, her eyes shining with a newfound respect. "They are the deadliest fighters in the universe, their capacity for violence and self-sacrifice unmatched by any species that Tyloth have ever encountered." As the Tyloth fleet retreated from Earth's orbit, the human defenders erupted in a deafening roar of triumph. Soldiers and civilians embraced, their faces alight with a fierce pride that transcended mere victory. "We showed those alien bastards what we're made of, didn't we?" Grizzly, the grizzled veteran, bellowed, his laughter booming across the ruins of the battlefield. "Nobody messes with our home and gets away with it." Beside him, the young woman with the piercing eyes nodded, her expression hardening with a newfound determination. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "The Tyloth may have retreated, but they'll be back, and when they do, we'll be ready." Sarah Johnson watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with a sense of awe and respect. She had come to Earth as an observer, tasked with understanding the human species, but in the end, she had been the one transformed. "They are not mere primitives," the xenobiologist whispered, her fingers tracing the words etched into her datapad. "They are the deadliest fighters in the universe, their warrior spirit forged by millennia of conflict and hardship, and if the Tyloth Empire dares to underestimate them again, they will face the full, terrifying might of humanity's rage." As the sun rose over the battered cities and towns, the human defenders stood tall, their eyes fixed on the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For they knew that they were the deadliest fighters in the universe, and no force in the galaxy would ever break their will.